Holy crap. What the heck? What is happening? Now, there we go.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll start and we'll get Spencer to edit it out
Yep.
because I don't know when this is going to start. So, all right, start in 3, 2, 1. What's up, 49ers faithful? We are back with another episode of the 49ers Webs of No Huddle podcast on the Odyssey Network. I got Brian Renick with me. Al is on assignment this week. Busy man does busy things, right? The OG's got OG things
That's
that
right.
he's up to. So it's just Zane. It's the inmates running the asylum today, and we got some training camp stuff to talk about. We got some fun uniform stuff to talk about that we want to tease a little bit. But let's just get right into it, Brian. We got some training camp battles. We got some guys on the bubble. We have a really strong 49ers roster this year, and you can argue that it's been the strongest that Kyle Shanahan has ever had in his tenure here. You can argue that this is the best roster that the 49ers have had since the Jim Harbaugh days. So
Yeah.
that means there's very few and far between spots that guys are going to be able to obtain on this team. And that means that you're probably going to have a lot of talented guys getting cut and picked up by other teams, which is a good problem to have. That means you're a solid roster. That means you're a good team. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about some position groups. Let's talk about some players on the bubble. Let's talk about some guys we expect big things out of. So Brian, let's take it away.
Yeah. Speaking of training camp starting, right? Training camp phenomenon. Real quick. Training camp phenomenon. Jalen Hurd signing with the Patriots. So that could be interesting. I am definitely gonna to follow that from afar because again, a legend, just an absolute legend in 49ers training camp lore. But yeah, so like you said, there are very few spots, or at least starting spots, to be battled for with this roster, which again just speaks to the talent level that they have cultivated here. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about are guys that are really, I would argue, it's not a battle so much as they are battling on the bubble to make this roster. And there's really you and I were talking off air prior to recording, and really those battles are along the offensive line. We got a couple things to talk about on the defensive line, but I'm not sure there's a ton of bubble guys. And then linebacker and cornerback. And so let's go ahead and start on the offensive side of the ball, because really there's only one position group that we're really looking at in terms of a battle, and that is the offensive line. I guess you could argue we don't know how many running backs they're going to carry. If they carry 4, then you're looking at McCaffrey, Mitchell, Jordan Mason, and Ty Davis Price. I would imagine if we're talking about a battle, it's between Mason and Ty Davis Price. I don't really think there's a whole lot to talk about there. I think Mason has shown more than TDP has, but TDP has that 3rd round draft status, if you will. So I'm not sure that they're really ready to give up on him yet. But really, it's along the offensive line. And it's interesting. We haven't gone into a season recently where there wasn't some kind of flux when it came to positions on the line and who was going to fill them. And we've talked in previous episodes, but Chris Furster, the offensive line coach, has already come out and said the right guard position is Spencer Burford's to lose, and the right tackle position is Colton McKivit's position to lose. And so really we know the starting 5 already, unless of course one of them has an absolutely awful camp, and that is Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, and Colton McKivitz, with the biggest question mark arguably being how is McKivitz going to hold up. We don't know that answer. That'll be interesting to see through the preseason. Where the battle comes in is kind of that depth along the line. And the 49ers have a lot of dudes in camp along the offensive line. In fact, we were looking at the roster again prior to recording, And there's currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 guys in camp along the offensive line. And you're looking at a position group that is probably going to carry 8, 9 at the most. So you're looking at 5 to 7 guys that are going to not make that 53 man. And really what we wanted to look at was John Feliciano, the guard or interior offensive lineman that they signed this offseason to a 1-year deal. Jason Poe, my personal favorite undrafted free agent from last year. I'm hoping for big things from him. I still want to see him at fullback, but I don't think that's going to happen. Jalen Moore, the swing tackle that they drafted 2 years ago, and then Nick Zakelj, who they drafted last year. Those are really kind of the guys that I think are battling for those last 3 to 4 spots. And so, it'll be interesting. I'm going to open practice on Thursday. I'm excited about that. I'll report back on that. But, when it comes down to it, I mean, Feliciano is an interior offensive lineman only. And that may be something that is not in his favor, but at the same time, they guaranteed him $2.25 million. I'm not sure with their cap the way that it is, I'm not sure they're ready to eat that on a player that's not even on the squad. So then it comes down to Poe, Zakelj, Moore, and we forgot Matt Pryor. Matt Pryor is another one. Matt Pryor was a free agent that they signed this offseason. He is a swing tackle. And so really you're looking at Zakelj, who is arguably the most versatile of all those. I think they're grooming him for possibly being the center of the future, although they did sign Brendel to a 3-year extension or a 3-year deal. But Zakelj can play center, interior, and tackle. And then you've got Moore, Pryor, I think are battling for that swing tackle role. And then you've got, you've got Feliciano, who I think will be the backup at both guard spots and center. What do you think about kind of that positioning, if you will?
So I think that despite what you said about Feliciano, I think that he makes the team just because you have to have a backup center. You have to have somebody else that can snap the ball. And I feel like him and Zakelj are probably the closest to making the team because of his versatility, because he can play anywhere, right? Like his college position was tackle, but they want to groom him to be able to play center as well. And when you have attrition along the offensive line, which happens every single year, you have to have guys that can kind of shuffle around and be able to kind of slide into spots where they aren't necessarily comfortable. So I think that those two guys will make it. I think that so the team has been really high on Jalen Moore. Jalen Moore's been hurt for a good portion of his career, and they keep bringing him back because of his versatility to be able to play both tackle spots. And I think that that's one thing, the comfort with the system, the comfort with Jalen Moore as a player. Like Kyle has his guys, right? And I feel like he's a Kyle guy.
Good point. Yeah.
And I think that bodes well for him. With everybody else, with Pryor's kind of on the outside looking in, just because again, like they kind of brought him in this year, and it's kind of like, well, what do they do? And like you're looking at, really, to me, those first 3 guys I feel like will make it for sure. And anybody beyond that, we're looking at practice squad, because you've got your starters, you got your 3 guys, that's 8 guys, and maybe another guy that they might elevate from the practice squad back and forth. And then you have like your solid, like Jason Poe, like developmental practice squad guys that you hope to find he's position agnostic right now, right? Like, is he a fullback? Is he a defensive lineman? Is he an offensive lineman? Like, what does he do? Right. So I think that he's, you remember back in the day, they had Lawrence Okoye in camp.
Yes.
That's and they didn't really have a position.
What was he? He was a shot put champion from Great Britain, right?
Yes, and he was just like an athletic freak, and they just didn't have a position for him. Like I feel like Jason Poe is like that with a football background, right? Where he's just an athletic freak, and they want to keep him around to be able to find a position for him. He's one of my favorite guys, right, on the roster. I'm a big Jason Poe guy, right? So
I mean, his biggest issue is he's only 6 feet tall. That's
Exactly.
that's the biggest knock on him.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, center and guard are the only options for him along the offensive line. But you know, I think it's a tough road to hoe for him, because there's really only one other player with his build that has seen any level of success. Granted, it's a significant level of success, and that was Shaq Mason, former Patriot and current Tampa Bay Buccaneer, who is 6 feet tall, 305 pounds, but has been a stalwart on the interior. So, to me, Poe is a wild card, right? In terms of if there's a player that could play his way on to the 53 man in that group, I think it's Jason Poe. I think everybody else is kind of trying to figure out, you know, whether or not we think that we need to put him on the 53 to keep him, or if we can get him to the practice squad, you know, and get him through waivers and get him on the practice squad. And so the thing, and to me, the interesting thing about Nick Zakelj was he played tackle at Fordham, but he called all the protections from the tackle position, which is impressive.
Right.
But again, speaks to them trying to groom him as a center.
Also team captain as well at Fordham.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
and those are dudes that they identify and tend to do well in this program. So yeah, I think, you know, I think you're right. I think Pryor is on the outside looking in. I think Poe right now is on the outside looking in. And then you're looking at Feliciano as the backup to the 3 interior spots, Moore as the swing tackle, and Zakelj as the do-all, jack of all trades, if you will. I think that's probably a pretty fair assessment. So let's move over to the defensive line. Again, I don't think there's a lot in terms of guys that are on the bubble trying to make the team. I guess you could argue Robert Beal Jr. I think he needs to show something in camp in order to make the 53 man, you know, even as a 6th round pick. You know, he is a 4-5 guy off the edge. I think that he's going to have an impact this year, but he's going to have to prove that. The intriguing thing for me is actually along the interior, and that's with Javon Kinlaw, right? So you've got your 2 starters in Armstead and Javon Hargrave, and those guys probably aren't going to come off the field all that often, right? And so you know, Hargrave, I think, played something like 85% of the snaps for the Eagles last year. Just an absolute dog in there. And Armstead, you know, Armstead has his injury issues. You know, he battled foot problems last year, but is an absolute key piece to that defensive line. But you've got Javon Kinlaw, you've got Kalia Davis, you've got T.Y. McGill, and you've got Kevin Givens. And I don't think that they're going to keep all of them. And I'll be perfectly honest, they already declined Kinlaw's 5th-year option. I think Kinlaw has to play his way on to this roster. I don't think he just makes it because he was a 1st rounder. That's over. You know what I mean? He's got to show something. And so I think of all those guys, he's the one that absolutely has the most to prove.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there is no larger indication of that than the Javon Hargrave signing, because they identified that they essentially missed on that Kinlaw pick. That's them admitting that they missed on that pick, right? That's
for sure.
It looks like to me. So that being said, Javon Kinlaw, first of all, his number 1 step is to remain healthy. I think that's been the biggest thing in his career, has been health and being able to be available. But at the same time, it's not just about health, it's about production too. So step 1 is make it through camp healthy. Step 2 is make it as tough as of a decision as possible on the coaching staff and the 49ers in terms of roster decisions and what's going to happen at the end of this. Because remember, now they're cutting down straight to 53. There's no phased cut down anymore, right?
Yeah.
That was out the door last year.
Yep.
So you're seeing a lot of guys that will be on the street come the end of week 4 preseason, and there's going to be a lot of talent. So there's no early indication of what's going to actually happen, and there's no way for these guys to find another team right away, right? So I think that's the other challenge that you have now, is that if you have a position in need and previously you were waiting for the cut downs to happen and maybe pick up a body here or there, you don't have that luxury anymore. So who you have right now is basically who you're going to have going into the season at this point. And it's a nuanced small thing, but it's actually a really big thing because you don't get the chance to have a look at other guys before week one. You have that 1 week in between week 4 preseason, or sorry, week 3 preseason and week 1 as they've cut down the preseason games to 3 now. So
Yeah.
I feel like Julian Taylor was let go. I believe he bid farewell to the 49ers, right? I believe this past week. So there's some space there on the defensive line, some spots there that could be had as far as depth goes. But I feel like for Javon Kinlaw, like this is it. This is if he doesn't make it through this camp with at least a backup role, there's no role for him on this team because they've turned into the number 1 defense in the league without him. And they've shown that they can get by fine without him. And that's really unfortunate because that's a first round pick that you invested in just a couple of years ago. And to be moving on already from that without any major production at all, I mean, that stings. That definitely stings. The Ayuk pick basically saved that first round. Brandon Ayuk did. So
for sure.
That is one of the picks. That and obviously the Trey Lance pick, which everyone wants to talk about at nauseum, which I'm sure that we will in this episode because what's 49ers training camp without a quarterback battle, right?
I mean, and to be perfectly honest, that's probably the biggest battle is Trey Lance and Sam Darnold and battling for QB2. But before we get there, let's continue on the defensive side. Again, if here's the thing that may save Kinlaw in terms of in terms of whether he makes the roster or not. He's making $4.9 million this year. If they cut him, they get no cap relief. The dead cap is $4.9 million. So he may make it just because they'd rather pay him $4.9 million to try and do something than pay him $4.9 million to go away. So, he does have that. That's the advantage of being a first round pick is right. You've got him by the purse strings, if you will. Or as my uncle used to say, the short hairs. But let's go ahead and look at linebacker because I think this one is actually really interesting. So the 49ers lost Azeez Al-Shaair. He went and signed with the Titans. And his position is one that is the first to come off the field in sub packages, right? In sub packages, Al-Shaair left and it was just Warner and Greenlaw. And then Shaair was replaced by the nickel corner. And Steve Wilks plays a lot of nickel. He loves to rush his nickel. They signed Isaiah Oliver to play nickel. And so the interesting part is that third linebacker even a very important part of Steve Wilks' defense? The 49ers love to play base defense, especially on first down. And that is a 4-3, right? They have that third linebacker out there. But is that third linebacker all that important? And I don't know. But here's the thing that they did do is they drafted 2 in this draft, right? They drafted 2. They didn't sign. I mean, I think they signed some undrafted free agents, but they drafted 2 guys. They drafted D Winters in the 6th round, who to me is like a Dre Greenlaw clone. And they drafted Jalen Graham out of Purdue, who was former GM Scott McCloughan, one of his favorite picks for the 49ers. He loves Jalen Graham out of Purdue. Big guy, 6'3", 220. D Winters, again, Dre Greenlaw is 6 foot 230. D Winters is 5'11", 227. So like I said, basically a clone and just a sideline to sideline guy. But obviously Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, they're making the squad, right? Oren Burks, I think, is going to make the squad. They signed him last year largely as a special teams ace, but Burks actually got a lot of time, especially when there were injuries. And so again, I think Burks makes the team as well. So there's 3. So then it comes down to really, I think there's 2 positions left. I think they typically carry 5 linebackers. Those 5th and 6th linebackers are largely special teams contributors. And in the past 3 seasons, that's been Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. That's why he's made the team. He's been a special teams ace, but they've got D Winters now. They've got Jalen Graham, and they've also got undrafted free agent Marcelino McCrary-Ball, who they had last season as well, that I think they're high on. And so I think Fowles has an actual battle to make this roster, because like I said, out of Flanagan Fowles, Winters, Graham, and Marcelino McCrary-Ball, I think out of those four, they're only going to keep two of them, because I think Burks, like I said, is that third linebacker. And so it'll be interesting to see if he can do anything, especially with some defensive snaps, right? We know what he can do on special teams. So what you may find is that you're seeing more Winters, Graham, McCrary-Ball, guys like that playing special teams in the preseason, trying to see what they can do. And you might see more Fowles get more opportunities as a linebacker just to show that he can do it. And so I think he's battling for a roster spot. And arguably, I think he's probably going to lose, because I think they're again, they don't, when they draft a player, even in the 6th, 7th round, they tend to give them all the opportunity to make the team. And so, again, they drafted 2 guys. So that'll be interesting to see as well.
Yeah. So my other thing that I was thinking about was, with Steve Wilkes becoming the defensive coordinator, you're going to see some creativity as well. Not that D'Amico Ryan's wasn't creative, but they were just so good that they just out-talented you. The Niners did, right? That's kind of what they did. They didn't disguise a lot. They were very much like, hey, here it is. It's right in front of you. And, I dare you to beat us. Yeah. Could we see more Talanoa Funga in the box as at their linebacker? Possibly. On certain downs, certain situations, right? It's not unfathomable. Could we see Isaiah Oliver play a hell of a lot more than we had any slot corner play in the past? That's possible as well. Like Steve Wilkes, like you said, plays a lot of likes to play a lot of nickel. But I think that as far as the linebackers go, you're hoping for a lot of passing situations, because your defensive line is dominating up front and forcing 2nd and 3rd and longs, right? That's what you're hoping for. So I think that they've identified that position and said that, well, that's a position that we're willing to kind of concede on, in a way, in terms of bringing elite talent in. And the reason why is because that will probably be used scarcely when it comes to game day. So I think, Oren Burks probably gets that first crack at it. If he struggles, D. Winters, I think, would probably get the second crack at it, because McCrary-Ball and Flanagan Fowles, also, I love the fact that they're both hyphenated. That's awesome.
Yeah.
They should. I feel like the Niners are the only team in the league that has two hyphenated guys on the same defense. I think that's really cool. I don't think anybody else has that.
They also have Davis Price.
They have TDP, Ty Davis Price. Yeah. They have another hyphenated guy. So I think that they probably lead the league in hyphens, probably. So
and technically Ray McLeod.
Yes,
Ray's
technically Ray McLeod. That he is the hyphen in the first name. We should have an all hyphen team, just an episode dedicated to all hyphen team. But
that'd be interesting.
That would be cool. But I think that I think what you're saying is correct. Those out of those 4 guys, the rookies plus the hyphens, we'll call them. 2 of those guys make it, but I think that what's going to happen is that you'll probably have a mix of hyphens and rookies. I feel like, again, Flanagan Fowles is one of those guys where he may have to battle for a spot, but you'll see him end up on the practice squad, and you'll see him come up and down and as needed for special teams work or for depth and things like that. The special teams unit is not one of the better ones in the league. So I feel like because of that, they may feel like it's interchangeable parts there, and they want some fresh blood. So getting rookies in there is a good way of doing that, and getting guys on cheap contracts is a good way of doing that, because you have to minimize your cap hit for next year when inevitably Kirk Cousins is your quarterback, right? And you have to make that signing, right? Because that's where and we will talk about this as the season wears on and as we get towards the end of the season, hopefully with the Niners Super Bowl championship. But that's one thing that I'm dying to discuss at some point. Not because I like Kirk Cousins, but because we all know Kyle by now, and his affinity for Kirk Cousins, right? So I'm just going to call that. And I'm going to call that the first day of camp, or the first week of camp in 2023, a year ahead of it, to say that Kirk Cousins will be a 49er next year. And it's irrelevant what Brock Purdy does this year because he has his eye on Kirk Cousins. I'm going to call that right now.
I 100% am on board. I think I agree with you. I am adding one caveat, and I've said this already. If the 49ers don't win the Super Bowl this year, Kirk Cousins is the quarterback next year. If 100%. They do, then he's not. But so hey, tall order for Brock or Trey or Sam or Brandon, right? Whoever it is, tall order. But last thing we wanted to look at on the defensive side of the ball is in the secondary. There are some interesting battles here, mainly because there's some guys that have some fairly high draft pedigree that might be on the outside looking in. At the cornerback position, I'm looking specifically at you, Ambry Thomas. Thomas was drafted in the 3rd round in 2021 and then ended up starting the last 7 games of 2021 and then the 2 playoff starts as well and played really well. And then for whatever reason, just fell off a cliff after that season and was passed up by Diamador Lenore, who seems to have locked down that cornerback position opposite Mooney Ward. And so you're looking at really Mooney Ward and Diamador Lenore locks. Isaiah Oliver lock. So there's 3. Really you're looking for who are your other 3. And to me, one of those could be Miles Hartsfield, who is listed as a safety, but is kind of a hybrid safety cornerback guy, brought over from Carolina, knows Steve Wilkes, knows his system. That feels a little bit, I'm not going to call that a lock, but I think he has an inside edge. And so really Ambry Thomas is battling with guys like Darrell Luter Jr. and Sammy Womack for a spot on this roster because he didn't show anything last year. And at this point, again, your third round status isn't going to do much for you, especially in a crowded room. Now, Luter, we know from our past episode, is starting the starting camp on the PUP list. So that could hurt his chances, at which point that could help Ambry Thomas. But again, if you're talking about Ward, Lenore, Oliver, Womack, and then Hartsfield. Thomas, and Hartsfield, there's your 5, right? Yeah. They don't tend to carry 6 cornerbacks. And so, like I said, Thomas could be on the outside looking in. So could Luter if he's not able to get out there and compete. Because at safety, if you look at the 49ers roster right now, they actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys listed at safety, right? Safety, a position that typically has 2 starters and 4 on the roster total. And those are Jair Brown, Tayshaun Gibson, Miles Hartsfield, Taylor Hawkins, Talanoa Hufanga, George Odom, and Avery Young. And here's the thing. You look at a theme for these safeties, and here's the theme. And we'll start with Jair Brown. 23, 25, 25, 23, 23. And then you've got Odom at 29 and Tayshaun Gibson at 32. Those are ages, right? Mm-hmm. Odom and Gibson are far and away the oldest of that group. I think Odom might be battling for a roster position as well, because you've got Gibson and Jair Brown, right? And you've got Hufanga, and you've got room for one more. Now, is that Miles Hartsfield, and then you carry an extra corner, or does Miles Hartsfield, does he take that 5th corner spot, and then you can keep an Odom, or you can go with a younger guy like a Hawkins. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think that they signed Odom to a 2-year deal. I think they'll keep him. But yeah, so I think those 4 will be Gibson, Hufanga, Brown, and Odom as your 4 safeties. And then I think Hartsfield, like I said, I think Hartsfield may take that 5th cornerback spot, but be more of a hybrid role.
Yeah, I can see that. one guy that you can basically say that is a lock to make the team is Jair Brown, right? Like that.
Oh,
That's
certainly.
That was an early pick, or early for this draft, an early
Their first
pick for
pick.
them. It was their first
Their
pick,
first
and
pick.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't think something would have to be catastrophically wrong for them to not put him on the roster. So he's making the roster. Gibson obviously makes the roster, but that's an expiring contract, right? So that's going to be a contract.
Yeah, it's just a 1-year deal. And Gibson wasn't even sure he wanted to come back, and he came back because he wanted to play with Hufanga. He enjoyed it. Personally, I think Gibson will start the season. I think Brown is going to end it, to be perfectly frank. I think I would say within the first 8 games, you're going to see Brown overtake Gibson and never look back. And then you've got, the young guns in Talanoa Hufanga and Jair Brown manning the back end of the defense for the 49ers.
Really exciting. I think that's going to be an exciting backfield. So, but yeah, man. And the one thing we didn't touch on today, which, you know what, I kind of don't want to touch on it.
Tease it.
I kind of want to tease it. Well, the one thing that I wanted to touch on today was so for those of you who haven't noticed, it's throwback week in the NFL, and I'm a big uniform and jersey guy. I'm a huge uniform jersey guy. Like, I own several jerseys of different ilks of the 49ers, different eras. And I pay attention to things like piping and shadowing and like outlines and stuff like that, and logos and aesthetically pleasing things, right? Like, I always have.
You could call yourself a uni nerd, if you will.
I could call myself a uni nerd, and you could put me on the uni watch list.
So
we've got a guest coming up that I'm really excited about, that is an aficionado in this field, and I'll just tease that. But I'll say this as well, that the Niners have one of the cleanest sets of uniforms in the entire NFL. Like, it's classic. Throwbacks are fantastic. Their current uniforms are a nod to the throwbacks. They're really, really well done. And they're one of the few teams that you could look at their actual stock uniform and be like, that is a classic look. That's a really good look.
It's iconic, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. So there's several other teams that released their uniforms this week. The Eagles, the Eagles haven't released theirs yet. The Falcons, the
Kelly Greens,
Buccaneers, the Kelly Greens are coming out. They haven't officially released it yet.
Yeah.
The Cowboys, the Bucks, the Vikings released a classic look as well. Is really nice. The Falcons released the Jerry Glanville era uniforms, plus the red helmet as well. There's the Bills that are hopefully releasing soon. The Patriots released Patriot Pat. Those uniforms, fantastic uniforms. So there's obviously the Seattle Seahawks as well, right? That was one of my favorites. We hate
the Seahawks, but those jerseys are fire.
so nice.
Yeah.
So I think uniforms and stuff, it's an important part of fandom too, right? Because it has a connection to the team.
For sure.
We all remember the 49ers and how they looked when they won, right? Like 94, they famously are the only team in the NFL, in NFL history actually, to wear like an actual throwback uniform in the Super Bowl and win.
That little nice 75 patch on the jersey.
Yeah, and it was cool. Like the little 75 patch. Like, when they won the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, it was the 100th anniversary, and they didn't really bring back any throwbacks for that year. But they had the small little 100 patch here. I felt like it was kind of a disservice. So I'm a big jersey patch guy as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to discuss that and hopefully a whole lot more with our special guest the next time. So I'm just going to tease it at that, and I'm super excited about that.
Yes, sir. And then, as I said earlier, I am going to open practice on Thursday. So I believe we might be putting out some content after that. And Al has just got a super busy week this week, but he will be back, and we will continue to talk these 49ers with their iconic red and gold jerseys. The saloon font is back as of last year. I appreciate that.
Yep.
But yeah, hey, training camp, it's here, guys. It's here. Actual football is starting. 49ers football is right around the corner, and I am hyped, and I hope you guys are too. But that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you for listening. For Zane and Al, I'm Brian, and we will talk to you guys next time.
Peace.
Later.